wishing them to be clean, returned and went away in a rage. But the servant approached and said to the prophet, "The prophet that commanded you to do something difficult is not done it. How much more will all be said to you was washed to be clean?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. His flesh was restored like flesh began to like his clean. Then he returned to the man of God, who he had taught his commandments, and came and stood before him and said, "Now I know there is no God in all the earth except in Israel."
All right. Now that section that's missing, and what we don't see, is that Naaman goes to the king of Aram and asks for a letter to present to the king of Israel, so that the king of Israel, you didn't go from one nation to the other, especially, I mean, this is a great man in high favor, commander of the army of the king of Aram. So certainly the king of Israel would know, probably knew who Naaman was, and recognized that Naaman also led the armies that captured Israelites, right? And took them into captivity. And so the king of Israel would not have been happy if Naaman was wandering around in his nation looking for the prophet. He would have thought that was a good news to get him, right? So the king of Aram sends along with Naaman a letter from the king of Israel. Well, and the king of Israel starts to lament because he really honestly thinks that they're just trying to destroy him. And that if the king of Israel does not produce this, then they'll bring the army in like he's expecting it to, and they'll fight for it. So that's where it gets to the point. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "My God, why are you doing this? You're going to come and kill us all anyway." So I think sometimes we need to understand that here it is, that the king of Naaman's king understands that there's someone, a prophet of God, who could heal Naaman. And Naaman is so important to the king of Aram that he's willing to put aside his differences and send Naaman to be healed. Okay? So, what did you hear in this text?
What I heard was there was a misunderstanding who the prophet was.
Ah! Mm-hmm.
They thought it was the king.
Yeah.
And Naaman then later found that it was Elisha.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, they just didn't really get the message from the young girl who knew that Elisha was there.
Little bit of miscommunication.
And it happens with us all the time.
All the time, doesn't it? Yep. Yes. What else, Margaret?
This man believed in God because what he did.
Because of what happened.
What
Yes. Yes.
So, what is basis of our faith in God?
Mm.
Remember, when Adam and Eve before the sin, they could talk to God,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they didn't follow God. So, what is now? All of us believe in God for certain reasons, right? Is it true? We believe in God because we have some personal reason, right? What should be the real reason to believe in God?
Mm.
How is it that, because if God makes a miracle, you believe in Him. That means He has to make a miracle every time, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That can't be the right motivation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, I guess I think of it as faith is the reason for everything. Not so much what is the reason for our faith. We have to have faith without really having anything solid. I don't know. to base it on. That's just the nature of faith, and that's what God asks of us. And so I don't think of it as faith leading to something else. I think everything begins with faith, I guess.
So
Does
if
that-
you believe in wrong thing, that's still faith.
But now I want to, so, I'm sorry.
No.
So Margaret, what I want to clarify here is, if we're looking at the reason Naaman came to faith, I think we have to understand where he was in the midst of all this. Naaman is not Jewish. He's not an Israelite. And Naaman does not believe in one God. What does Naaman believe in?
Probably several.
Several gods, right? And so, when God formed the Israelites, he did it so that they would come to understand that he's the most powerful God that there is. That any other God they had would be small compared to him. And so, in essence, what they had to do, their witness to the rest of the world, that was this one God was the God. Because if we remember right, whenever they fought, what was really going on? What was behind this whole fighting? Whose God is better? Because they believed that their God was the one that was helping them win. Now, it says here in the beginning that Naaman was blessed by God to fight the Israelites. Confusing. But why Naaman, a non-Israelite, why was he blessed by God to fight the Israelites? They were being punished. And they were being punished for not being faithful. All right? So here comes Naaman. The point of this being, Naaman still believed that his God was stronger because he didn't understand that it was God giving him what he needed to fight the Israelites. So he believed his God was stronger. And so he now comes to the realization that their God is stronger than the gods that, any of the gods that he believed in. And that's because he was healed. Now, I don't know then that we can translate this into our culture, into today, by saying that, our God is better than any God we could have.
That's true.
Right.
America, the best.
Right, but I don't think we
Yeah.
translate the reason that Naaman came to faith into that everyone comes to faith that way.
Or that we should come to faith.
Or that we should come to faith that way.
It seems to me that the basis of faith is just
Right.
faith.
Right, just faith. Now, the reality here is, Naaman, we say, came to faith, okay? Recognized his faith. What was the truth of the matter was Naaman had faith all along. There was faith within him all along. It was just awakened here. So I think the question to ask is, how is our faith awakened now?
Remember, Buddhists also believe that there is something beyond
Oh yeah,
us.
oh yeah.
They believe that there's more than just us. That doesn't mean they believe in some real concrete God. It is not at all.
Mhm.
That's not what our faith is, right?
Well, I would even say that we don't believe in a concrete God.
Wow, this is very important. Yeah. So our faith is because we don't know the concrete God,
Right.
right?
We don't know the concrete God because their God is not concrete. If-
Ooh,
If you're making God concrete, then except for Jesus, right? But if you're making God concrete, then you're creating what? An idol. Right. If you make God concrete, then you're creating an idol. Look at when Moses went up on the mountaintop, and what did all the people say? You promised, Moses promised to make for us, we want a golden calf. And so they collected so they were trying to make a concrete God. They wanted to make something that they could worship here. Well, that was an idol.
Well, this is very important. God is not concrete. It means God is just a concept, abstract.
God is abstract, yeah.
Who?
Well,
Abstract?
and I think we have to say God is abstract because God is not male or female.
Oh.
God is not, I mean,
See?
we put form to God, but there's really, God is not in a form.
He's a spiritual, invisible, doesn't mean he's not concrete. I understand God is more substantial than anything else, the reality.
The reality of God is more, yes, I believe that God is more substantial than anything else. I don't believe that there's a concrete God. And we must be talking about concrete in different ways.
I think there's, sounds like the same thing to me. But I know someone who uses the term transcendental entity, which is a huge thing, but God transcends life as we know it.
Right.
Physical life. So God can do anything at all, even though he isn't here with us because he's in charge, I'd say. He has providence.
What do you think? Say something.
Gordon, share some wisdom with us.
I have to look at the reading here.
Yeah.
See somehow the terminology changes. Look what Naaman begins to call Elijah. He called him a man of God.
Yes.
So he's recognizing right there that there's a God present outside of what he thought before.
Absolutely.
And he's a man of God. And he believes that that's what really transformed him when he went into the river, is the presence of the man of God. And that's what he believed when he left away. He doesn't say there's anything physical about that God. Not at all. He just
But God was
simply says
manifested through Elisha.
Yes, yes.
He could see God through
They all
Elisha.
listen to what they say. Right from the very beginning, we have the reading, Elisha, the man of God, and the king of Israel, which, strangely enough, they never name him. You know, the king of Israel believes that, and ultimately, so will Naaman, and that's all he believes in. He said, I know there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. So he's really putting God in a place too. And he's looking for something concrete. And I think if we go down the history of Israel, Israelites ultimately put God into a concrete form.
Right, that's
With
what,
the
yes.
ark, with the ark and so on.
Yes.
And the concrete form, from the priest's perspective, was to go there and be in the presence of God. Not that God physically was there, but he would be there in his.
But they were not they were not in the form of God.
No.
The ark was built to carry the things that were of God.
Yeah.
So there was nothing concrete that they ever built that was God. Right. And I understand what you're saying. That Naaman, yes, was looking for something concrete. He didn't get it. What he got was the man of God.
So I would add, to your question, I think that where is God? Where is he? Don't say, excuse me for saying he, but where is God?
Oh, I said he too, I think.
Where is he? Is he in church?
It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Is he at the altar? Is he in communion? Is he, and we're going to say exactly what you said, he's everywhere, he's
Omnipresent. Right,
So that makes him not concrete.
right.
Absolutely defines him as not concrete at all.
Right.
He can't be those three things and be concrete.
Mm-hmm.
He can't be physically human, present for our eyes and hands to touch and feel. He's not that.
Now remember, Jesus, God to Jesus is like my Father. I am His only Son. How concrete can you get?
That's to define a relationship. That's not to define concreteness. It's not to say that God is a man. It's to say it's a relationship. Why did Jesus have to come as a man?
Because He's a Son. God created
No,
Adam first.
no. Why did Jesus have to come as a man?
He can save us.
To save us, but why a man?
He had to
At
come to be
times.
in our form, human form.
But why not a woman?
So we could, oh, no. I don't know.
Why didn't he come as a woman?
Because he created
Because
Adam.
Huh?
Because
He
of
could have, but why didn't he?
You
Because
don't
of
listen
the
to me.
times.
Because of-
Because he created
Because of the
Adam.
times.
Yeah.
Yes, they
What-
would
what-
not
tell me
have
about-
accepted a woman.
Patriarchal.
Jesus came as a
patriarchal-
man because the times would not have, at that time, the culture would not have accepted a woman. Absolutely.
Right.
So the relationship between father and son is relationship. It's not about saying, well, here's Jesus in a male form, that makes God a male. No.
What were
Gordon.
most of the prophets?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Absolutely. And even the women that were, I mean, let's go to the women who followed Jesus and were, in essence, they were disciples.
Prophets that might
They're not
come
named
back,
as disciples. Right.
But
right.
in the form of,
Yeah.
in the history of Israel, the spokesmen for God were males. It was a male society.
Right, because the culture would not have, women were like less than nothing.
We can't look at it through our eyes today and trying to be,
Right,
which we have a hard time being.
right. But the reason
Not
Jesus
patriarchal.
had to come as a male is because they wouldn't have listened to a female at all. Rick?
I think this may change the focus of the discussion a little bit, but I think the really critical point is in verse 13, following up
Yeah.
the fact that Naaman gets angry, leaves, and the servants say to him, if the prophet had told you to do something great, something big, you would have done it. But instead you were asked to do something. And I think behind that is a motive that we can buy into. God doesn't ask us to do big things. The kind of stuff that the news media covers 24/7 is breaking news.
Everything is breaking news.
Yeah.
God asks us to do little things
Yeah.
that fly under the radar.
Yeah.
Mother Teresa said it well. I do lots of little things with love. And it doesn't draw attention to you. It
Right.
just, she was out there on the back streets of Calcutta, and people maybe noticed her, but mostly didn't. But the people she was taking care of very much noticed her.
I think it's Casting Crowns that has a song, and it goes like, I don't want to leave a legacy. I don't want things to point to me, only Jesus. And that's the thing,
Yeah.
you know, we think we've got to do big things so that people look at me and say, thank you for what you've done. Well, the point is, that's not, we should point them always to Jesus. Yes?
I find it interesting that the servant had more faith in Elisha. Don't you think that in itself is a really great point in here?
So here, I want to, you both are pointing to something that I think is important in this story. And so I'm going to, what we're looking at is the downfall of pride.
Right.
We're looking at the downfall of pride. Naaman is a very proud man,
Yeah.
right? He's a very proud man. And initially, I don't think he's angry because of what Elisha told him to do. That's not what made him angry. You know, granted, he says, you want me to go wash in the water 7 times? That's all you want me to do? What am I? But that's not initially why he was angry. Why was he angry to begin with?
Because
You should.
Because, go ahead, either one.
he had leprosy.
He was angry because he had leprosy, but even after the leprosy, why was he angry?
Because he couldn't do it.
Yeah, he couldn't do it.
He wanted the cure to be made physically by him coming on to waving his hands over him and healing him in public.
I am important enough
Yeah.
that you can't even come out
Right.
into my presence. You just shout from a distance. You're no better than the rest of them. When you want to say leprosy, you're a man of God, you should come close and you should heal me because I'm important. That's what he's initially
You're not even
angry
going to
at.
see me. You don't even.
You don't even see me, you don't know who I am. Right. He's angry because of that.
But there's great pride.
It's part of his pride.
There's great pride in the girl,
Right,
in the captive.
right.
The great pride is in
Right.
the captive when she says, "Tell my Lord."
Yes,
Tell Naaman. She calls him her Lord.
yes.
And she's a captive. She's immediately accepted the relationship with
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Naaman. And that's it. Interesting that it is Israelite woman
Right,
would do that.
right.
Because she's really doing the work of God.
Right, and I think too that you did say she's proud.
Yeah.
I think
She's given it up though.
she's proud. She's not necessarily proud in Naaman. I think she's proud in something else,
In her God.
in her God. Absolutely, proud enough in her God. She's just a young girl, and she's captive. She has no power whatsoever, none whatsoever. But she has the audacity to go to Naaman's wife and say, "Oh, he should be there with the prophet." You know.
That's a goodness in her.
Exactly, exactly. That's the goodness in her. And I think that it speaks to, so here's Naaman, that's a person. So I'm digging underneath here because Rachel mentioned that his, were they called slaves? His servants. His servants. The underlying piece here is that Naaman, if you remember a couple of weeks ago, I talked about Lazarus and the rich man. Do you remember that? Lazarus and the rich man? And do you remember what my sermon was? What was unique about that? Lazarus is named, and the rich man is not.
Yeah.
In that culture, the rich man would have been named, and Lazarus would not have been named, right? So here, this is exactly what culture is here. Naaman is named, because Naaman is somebody important. And because he's named, he's come to believe he's important too. But the girl, the mistress to the wife, she's not named. All that we know about her is that she's a captive and that she is from Israel. She's a captive from Israel. That's all we know about her. And yet, she is bold enough, because of God, she's bold enough to say what needs to be said. We come down to Naaman is, Elisha doesn't even come out. He's angry at that. But then Elisha just says, wash 7 times in the water. Now, here's the thing about Naaman, too, because he says here, Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus are far better. He's looking at the Jordan River, and he says, that's a dirty river, pond. I'm not going to go wash in that. What are you talking about? We have better, cleaner, clearer rivers in Damascus. Why can't I just go there and wash in those? And that's the point, though, is that he's instructed to wash in the river Jordan, all right, no matter what. But he's upset, too, that that's all he has to do. And yet, it's the servants who are bold enough. They should not be talking to their master like this. They should not. It's the servants who are bold enough to call him on it. So here are a bunch of unnamed people who are bold in their actions to really bring Naaman, knock him down a peg or two. Really, that's what it is, Gordon.
Look what they call it. They call Naaman father.
Yeah.
The servants call him father.
Mm-hmm.
But to Naaman, what does that mean?
Right.
That's the highest honor they could give him. So he listens.
Exactly. And what does a father do? Why would the servants call him father?
He listens to the children.
He listens to the children.
Yes.
Right.
And he's
Somewhere
the
along the way, they've got they've built up a trusting relationship with him. And so they know they can talk reason.
And so he just doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. He has such a trusting relationship with the servants that he listens to them and goes and washes it. It wasn't that he listened to Elisha, he listened to his servants.
Yeah, I think what find out, hadn't thought to use the word pride, but that fits. Because we like to think that we're in charge.
Oh.
We want God to do something for us, but
Yeah.
we want God to do it our way,
Right.
on our time.
Right.
And here come the servants and say, you know, just do what the prophet told you
Right.
to do.
Right.
And to do that, Naaman had to finally trust.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Promise that if you do this, you're going to get healed. And, you know, you just finally have to say, God, I don't know what's going on here,
Yeah.
but you said to do this.
Yeah.
So I guess I better do it. And it's not until we finally do it that we see the hand of God.
Right. Right.
And feel the presence of God. And, you know, I can't say, well, you do that, you're going to feel God with you. You got to do it.
Right. That's why so many times, so when we take our youth on mission trips, the ones who are going for the first time, they want you to tell them in detail everything that's going to happen. And my response to that is, this is an experience.
Right.
If I tell you my experience and you don't experience the same thing, you're going to be disappointed. So you have to, don't anticipate the experience, just experience. And I think that's too often, we don't do that. I'm the queen of what ifs. I can create every what if scenario that you can think of. And 9 times out of 10, when I finally live into the experience, it's nothing what ifed all over the place, right? And so I think that's a piece of, and I like what Rick is saying, that sometimes we just have to live into something and experience it, and then and when we're coming out of that experience, we recognize the hand of God. We don't always recognize the hand of God when we're in the midst of something, but we do recognize it often when we're out of it. Another thing I want to point out about this is, how many people did Naaman have to listen to before he was finally healed? Hello? That's not us, is it? We don't have to listen to a servant girl. We don't have to listen to Elisha the prophet. And then listen to his own servants as well. 3 times, basically, he had to be told. Now, he kept moving in the right direction, didn't he? The servant girl told him that he needed to go there. He went there. Elisha told him that he needed to go to the water. He became angry. He's going to go home. And then his servants reason with him, and he goes. But it took 3 times for him to go do what he was supposed to do.
And how many times did God have to call you before you
Yeah! Exactly.
And me.
Exactly.
And everybody else.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, how many times do we, and it goes back to what Rick said, it's about trust. My sermon, and I can't remember what Sunday's gospel reading was. But anyhow, my sermon was my call story in the contemporary service. And the very fact that I wasn't listening to God. And I wasn't listening to God because I wasn't trusting God. Because I didn't want to speak in front of people. And so I thought that I had to figure out how I spoke. Do you see what I'm saying? How I was going to speak in front of people. I finally had to break down and say, okay, God, I trust that you will give me what I need when I need it.
I had the same problem. I did not want to speak in front of people.
Yes.
For many, many years. And it took a special it's a gift, a
Right.
special gift from God for me to stand up at a women's retreat and talk about where the comforters or the quilts were to go.
Oh.
But I knew my subject. I knew what I wanted to get across. And that was the breaking thing that really broke me.
Right.
Because before I would have turned red, I would have been shaking, and this did not happen until I moved to Bradenton. And it took God kicking me out of Columbus.
Right.
And because when I left my home in Columbus, I said, God didn't just want me to leave, He kicked me
He
out.
kicked you out.
And I cried all the way to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
But moving to Bradenton gave me that courage that I needed from that pastor and from that church to do that.
And now as you look back on that experience, you can see the hand of God in it.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
not necessarily pre-Bradenton. You
Because
certainly couldn't see God in the move.
Yeah, He was just kicking me.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
He really pushed me.
Exactly. Same with me with seminary. I needed to be shoved. I mean, really. I'm on the edge of the diving board and God says, for crying out loud, you know?
Well, because my house sold one day.
Yeah, yeah,
And that was to be my forever home.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, oftentimes we think that we're going to fail at something. But why do we think we're going to fail at something? Because we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust ourselves.
We don't trust God in that.
Right, and then it's the root of that is not trusting God.
I
Right.
still ask God every day to help me trust more
Oh yeah,
because I still lack that.
yeah. But you know, for me, it wasn't. I can be honest with you about this, and I said this in the my sermon on Sunday. Is that I'm not a real good student. I don't read fast. I don't. I just am not a good student. But I like to read. So hear this, I like to read, but I like to read for pleasure. I don't want to read textbooks. That's hard for me to do. Hard for me to do is reading textbooks. And so it would be, at that time we were on quarters. The seminary here was on quarters. At the beginning of every quarter, I would start over again and have to pray for trust. All right, God, we got through that last quarter. Please be with me through this quarter. Help me to learn to trust you and know that I'm not going to get through this without you. And quite honestly, God sent people to me. It's the only way, and we would all say this. I have good friends from seminary, and we all agree with this. None of us would have gotten through seminary without each other. It's just how we worked.
I think I get back to the word pride.
Yeah.
What about all the people who face those challenges and don't recognize the presence of anything except
Yeah.
themselves?
Yeah. Yeah.
I did this all by myself. You did that all by
Right.
yourself. We did that all by
You
ourselves.
screwed up.
We did little challenges like that all the time. What's the first time you did as a child where there was no godness around you on it and you did it? You walked. You did all kinds of things. You do all kinds of things. In human life, you face things like that.
Right.
And you do. I've faced things like that. I can remember when I had a very difficult test I had to pass. And I went in there and I passed it. And when I came out, there was no relief. There wasn't this joy. It was just, thank God it's over.
Yeah.
You know, that's a sense of trusting in God too. Is to say, it's not me.
Right.
I came back, I didn't celebrate.
Right.
I came back, it's over.
Right. Right.
And that's what it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And when that occurs, and I used to tell kids when I would help kids in the graduate level, you're going to pass certain achievements in a graduate program. And sometimes you'll feel no acceleration whatsoever.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. That's the way it should be.
You're just
pass
doing
that
what
up
needed to be
and
done.
you go on.
Mm-hmm.
And once you reach that, the achievements you had, and then when you hit a roadblock you can't pass, then you'll accept it, more so than you would otherwise. And that's tough to do. And there are many times when we do that, we do reflect back and say, you know, there was something else there.
Yeah.
There was something else in this process. And it was trust in God, trust in something. Some people say something.
Trust in something.
Yeah.
Right, trust in
But
something.
for those who really look at the concrete stuff, I would say, thank you, God.
Well, if you remember the parable from Sunday at the end, see that I do remember that. The parable was that do the servants in the field come in and eat first? No. They serve the master first. And then after that, they serve themselves. And the master doesn't say thank you for coming in from the field. And why aren't they upset that the master doesn't say thank you for coming in from the field? Because they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, right? And to that extent, what Gordon is saying too is that sometimes in life, if we've come to trust God the way God wants us to love and trust God, then we are just doing what we're doing. And it is, we don't have to really name that trust anymore. It just is there. It's a part of who we are. And it becomes a part of the way we make decisions, right? And I think that's what God wishes for all of us, is that it becomes so ingrained in us that we just do what we're supposed to do, right? Cheryl, then Rick.
Well, and we give God credit. I mean, I'm thinking about Moses all this time. Who did not give God credit. And I think that that's an important part of it too.
Right. Rick?
Yeah, I gotta think that even as Naaman backed off and headed back to the Jordan, there was an element inside, within him that said, was thinking, what am I gonna do if this doesn't work?
Yeah.
How am I gonna get even with this guy?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it's part of me that, I hear God saying, do this.
Yeah.
And when I finally agree to, okay, I'm gonna jump off the diving board,
Yeah.
what if there's no water in the pool?
Right. Right.
Faith.
Yeah. And that's very, and so it was I'm gonna pull out a different story. So Jericho. Remember when they captured Jericho? What did God tell them to do? March around the city 7 times and then blow the horns.
Right.
And then the city came crumbling down. Now when they went around the first time, how much of the city came down? None of it. And they went the second time, and how much of the city came down? Nothing. And they went the third time, and why didn't they quit? Nothing's happening. Well, think about Naaman. He goes to the river, and he's supposed to wash 7 times, right? So he goes down 1 time, comes up. Nothing. He goes down number 2, comes up. Nothing. Now he's angry at Elisha anyway for doing this. And his mind has to say, this is not working. I don't know why you even did that. And then, when he comes up from the 7th time, there it is. And it was just, and so in that case, it was also being obedient. The Israelites had to be obedient and march around 7 times and blow the horn like God told them to do. And in that obedience, they were blessed when the walls came down. In his obedience, so here it is, Naaman is obeying God. In his obedience, he was blessed on that 7th time because he was healed. So I think there's a piece of that here too, that Naaman, who didn't really believe in God, is obedient to God without really even knowing it. Margaret?
So it means you either obey completely to the end, and if you quit in the middle, it's really nothing.
Interesting.
It's very important you follow through to the end. When the Americans say it's not over until it's really over.
Yeah,
So obedient, it means completely.
right.
Very challenging,
Yeah,
So when you have a risk of something, you like say blind leap of faith or jump, you would need some kind of an inner conviction
yeah,
that is from God.
right.
It shouldn't
Well-
be now your ambition or any kind of a circumstantial, any
Right,
kind of beneficial. It shouldn't be any of this.
right.
So this is not an ordinary thing, but something
Right.
that's rare in your life.
Right.
But it's it's not like haphazard or accidental.
Right,
in this
right.
case.
And that's a good point, Margaret. Left to myself, when I use the diving board, and I use that because the psychologist that I was working with, you have to do psychology tests before you can get into seminary and blah blah blah. So and the reason I use that illustration all the time is because he said to me, well, it's time to jump in the water. So he was, because I was talking about, there's a whole story behind it, but he says it's time to jump in the water. Now, if jumping in the water were up to me, I don't like to jump off diving boards. Not at all. All right? I don't like going under the water longer than I can breathe to get back up again. I panic every time. If it were up to me, I would have had a life jacket on. There would have been some kind of a mat at the bottom that I would have jumped into and I'd have been safe. But you see, it wasn't up to me. So when I jumped, I had to trust that God had water there. God had a safety net for me. God had what I needed to do to dive into the water and be okay. But sometimes we want to we want to control what's being
That's
done.
called a leap of faith.
You betcha. You
And
betcha.
The other thing, you're talking about your seminary decision, her big decision.
Yeah.
We aren't all going to have big
No,
decisions.
right.
But we're all going to have smaller
Right.
decisions that we
Right.
could miss too.
Exactly. That's exactly what Rick was talking about. Every day we're faced with these small decisions, and sometimes we miss them because we're looking for that bigger thing that God is calling us
And
to
when we
do.
miss it,
Yeah.
we don't realize what God has in store for us. That's why you want to persevere and follow,
Yes.
because He has something better for you.
Yes.
Especially in bad times.
And we don't want to believe that we don't know the plan.
Right.
Seriously?
But
I don't know the plan.
plan's better than
Yeah.
the plan.
We used to have somebody that went on mission trips with us, and she always wanted to have the agenda. Can I have the agenda? Well, what's the problem with agendas?
They don't work.
They don't work. They fall apart. Timing is everything. You take 50 kids on a mission trip, it's like herding cats. So there's no way you're going to stay to the agenda, and then somebody gets upset because we're not sticking to the agenda. We're not sticking to the plan. Well, why do you think God doesn't tell us what the plan is? Because somewhere along the line we get upset and say, well, that wasn't part of my plan. What are you talking about? Right? Yeah. And we miss the ordinary, everyday things that God is calling us to do.
There's a lot of those.
You betcha. You betcha. Let's move on to 2 Timothy. And here again, this is just a continuation of Timothy. So if someone would read this.
Remember Jesus Christ, raised from the dead, a descendant of David, that it is my gospel for which I suffer hardship, even to the point of being chained like a criminal. But the word of God is not chained. Therefore I endure everything for the sake of the elect, so that they may also obtain the salvation that is in Christ Jesus with eternal glory. The saying is sure, if we have died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. Remind them of this and warn them before God that they are to avoid wrangling over words, which does no good but only ruins those who are listening. Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved by him, a worker who has no need to be ashamed, rightly explaining the word of truth.
So, this is so Paul. Yeah, go ahead, Gordon.
We're gonna wrangle over a word here.
Yeah, what's the word you want to wrangle over?
Elect.
Ah, the elect. Ah,
How does he explain that to me?
yeah.
Strange
Yeah.
word. I don't know what it means in Greek. or
Yeah,
in the
I'd have to go back
translation.
and see what it
I
means.
have no idea what the translation means.
Right,
but that's,
right.
Which word?
Elect.
Elect. When he says, where
For
does
the
he say
sake
it?
of elect.
For the sake of the elect.
Elect, yeah.
Could it mean chosen?
Well, I would think that that's what it means,
Yeah.
chosen. Because he's really talking about the Jewish people who believe in Jesus. Yeah, and so I think that's what he means by elect, but I want to,
It's a tough word. I don't know.
I know, it isn't.
Normally, I just skip over that and say.
I know.
Go on to other meaning in that.
I wish I had my,
What's in there.
That,
I agree.
Maybe that's what he means when he said, don't wrangle over words.
yeah, yeah, don't get caught up in words. Well, remember, and we haven't talked about this for a long time, that sometimes we get caught up in the minutia. We get caught up in the words and we want to figure out what that word means, and it's like, no, I think what we need to be looking at is what is God doing here? Yeah, not the word, right.
In Christ's itself.
Yeah, Margaret.
Sacrifice.
Yes, yes.
Well, the verse 11,
Uh-huh.
if we have died with him, we will also live with him. Does that mean we have to die with him in order to live with him?
If we wanted to, we could, there is a particular time in our worship service, not every Sunday, it doesn't happen every Sunday, but a particular time in the worship service where we believe that a person dies to their old self and rises to new. What is that?
Dying to sin.
confession.
Redemption.
Baptism.
Oh.
Baptism. Baptism really means that we die to our old self and rise to a new life in Christ. So, the saying is sure, if we have died with him, so, and I'm not saying this is just for the baptized, but what I am saying is that we recognize in some way that we've given ourselves up for the sake of Jesus, right? And then that means if we have died with him in that way, we will also live with him. What does that mean?
We are resurrected.
Yes, that's what it means.
That's what
It is the promise of resurrection, absolutely.
But many of the Negro spirituals, they use the word for washed away.
Yeah, yeah,
Washing away.
yeah.
I mean,
Washed
washing
as,
away the sin.
right. I was washed as white as snow.
Right.
Yeah.
Or washed in the blood of Jesus.
Washed in the blood of Jesus, absolutely. Cheryl, you were going to...
The baptism part bothers me because we do infant baptism.
Right.
And infants aren't capable really of,
You're right. But we don't believe it's the infant that acts on it.
no, I know that it's I think of it as a dedication.
Oh,
Not
no,
even
no,
a
no. I
dedication.
think of it as a sacrament. God is the one who claims that person, and God says that now I'm going to, that person is a part of the elect. I mean, if you want to use that word, I don't like that word either. But if we say it's dependent on the child,
No,
it means nothing.
I mean, the dedication is dependent on the parents until the child is old enough.
The baptism, this is where I'm going to argue. It's not a dedication. The baptism is dependent on the child. A dedication, churches who dedicate, it's really a naming. There are churches that just dedicate, they don't baptize. And so it's just a naming. I'm dedicating my child to God, right? Well, that's good, but that relies on you.
Well, and that really gets to where I didn't get.
Yeah, yes.
No, because God has done something, but it requires us to do something too.
Oh, absolutely. When you promise that you're going to have this child live in the faith, you have a part to accomplish in that too.
But even as it's, where is it in this? But even the reading, I think,
Yeah.
is more about that than.
More about. Oh, it's not. I pulled out baptism out of it. This is not about baptism.
Right.
Yes, but I wanted to get to the point of dying. There are other ways that we die to self.
And to this world.
Right, and to this world. Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
This is really true. If you really die and you came to live, this must involve an enormous amount of joy.
Yeah.
Enormous amount of, you can imagine how happy you would be. Did we really experience that and found an eternal, once you experience this kind of joy, it would be unending. You wouldn't have a gloomy, doom, whatever you call it, gloom and doom, whatever. You wouldn't have this absolute happiness. You
Absolute.
found life.
Right. But when do we get that?
Yeah, when do we have that experience? Death even.
When,
After death. Right.
yeah.
We don't experience that kind of joy until resurrection. Right?
Well, you're supposed to be already resurrected, right? You died with Christ, with the Jesus.
You've seen photos and seen experiences of people who convert in evangelistic meetings. They convert. They'll frequently break down and cry.
Mhm. Sure.
They break down and cry, and the crying probably is the satisfaction that you're talking about,
Right.
of recognizing the presence of Jesus.
Right.
That, unfortunately, is not easy for that to continue on
Right.
with the rest of your life.
Right. Well,
But
and
that
that's
joy is felt. You
Right.
see people that's-
it's the already but not yet.
Oh, yeah.
We already feel joy by having died with Jesus, but we have not yet fully reached
No.
that death and resurrection.
Well, don't say yet.
Yeah. Well, what does it mean? And so if you have died with him, I think if we limit that to physical death, then we have to take that as a bigger statement than just physical death. How do we die with Jesus?
I think we die to the things of this world.
Yes.
That this is
Yes.
not the most important thing.
We die to the things of this world. Jesus was the only selfless person in the world, ever. Only selfless person in the world. And I know Mother Teresa was brought up earlier, but Mother Teresa would be the first person to say that she was not selfless, all right? Jesus was the only selfless person in the world. When we die with him, that means we give up this world's, whatever it is in this world. So why is it the already but not yet?
Because we're human, we have to physically die and be resurrected.
Yes. We are human. We can die to self. We do confession every Sunday, don't we? And what do we do when we confess? We give our sins over. We ask to be forgiven for what we've done. We die to self. Whenever we do confession and forgiveness, we basically die to self and say that we want to live for Jesus, right? We want to be resurrected to rise for Jesus. So this is where the already but not yet comes in that we're called to give up what the world has to offer us, but we can't.
But here,
Right. Verse 12, if we endure, we will also reign with him. Yes.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
We not only live, but we will reign with him.
Yes.
Would we reign nothing? I mean, do we reign? Reign means,
Well, if you consider reigning, we are, Jesus called us this, we're brothers and sisters of Jesus. So, I mean, I'm fascinated by what's going on in England with the whole royal family and how the shifting of the monarchy is happening. So, but that doesn't mean this. It doesn't mean that if there's somebody who's in 15th in line to become the queen or king, it doesn't mean that they're not a part of the reigning. You see what I'm saying? They're a part of the family, and so they're a part of what's going on already. There's just one person who's making the decisions and doing this. It's the same way for us. Jesus is the one who's really reigning, but we're in line. Jesus told us that. We're brothers and sisters. That means we're in line. And then through Jesus, we reign as well.
I think if you reign with him, in the words he uses, you're in the kingdom of God.
Exactly. Exactly. Cheryl,
No,
did you?
go ahead.
Okay, Rick.
It's important in verse 14, verse 14, the first word in the translation that we read, it says remind them of this. The actual Greek word there is in a tense that says keep reminding.
Right.
I'm a slow learner, and sometimes people have to tell me something 14 or 15 times before I finally get it.
Right.
And what Paul is telling Timothy here is keep saying it.
Right.
Keep reminding people. And some of them will get it the first time, but some of them won't get it till the last time.
And you know what's interesting is that's one of the reasons why we attend church.
Yeah.
It's not because I got this new outfit and I really want you guys to see it. You know, if we really think about it, the reason that we attend church is, once again, we can be reminded every week of how we are called to live our lives. Absolutely. And it is that continuous.
And I think that's why Luther said that the first thing we do in the morning should be to remind ourselves
Right.
that we are
Put the
baptized.
cross on your forehead.
Yeah.
Remind, yes.
We belong to Christ. It isn't that we've forgot that. We've got to remind ourselves and everything that goes with that.
Right. And remember, I've said this before in here, the farther away we get from an event, what happens? Our memory fades.
Right.
Our memory fades, right? And so if there's an event and we want to remember it, what do? I'm thankful that my parents wanted to remember my birth. That was important enough to them that they celebrated my birthday every year. They could have said, it wasn't that big a deal. Yeah, it wasn't that big a deal, right? But we do. So if there are important events, we celebrate them. And I think that's the same way with Jesus. And I do think, quite honestly, Sundays, Sundays are a celebration every week. Even during the season of Lent, Sundays are a celebration. Do you know why? Because Sundays are mini Easters. Every Sunday is considered a mini Easter. What's so important about Easter?
It's when the Lord.
We are reminded of
His
the resurrection. So what happens every Sunday?
To remind us of that.
And that's why we celebrate on Sunday. Now, this is what I'm going to say. That doesn't mean that we're happy. That does not mean that, I come to church and I've got my party hat on every Sunday, because life happens, Oftentimes when someone passes away in the family, we say, I can't make it to church today. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I didn't come right away after my sister died. There's nothing wrong with that. But basically what we're saying then is, on a Sunday morning, it is to be reminded of the celebration of the resurrection in the midst of death, in the midst of not feeling like I want to feel. So last year, my sister died on the 16th. On the 23rd, we did Blue Christmas, and I preached. And somebody said to me, "Are you sure you want to do that?" And I said, "Absolutely." At that time, I didn't do it when my mom and dad died. I did not preach on Blue Christmas, but I wanted to this time because there was a piece of me that needed to be reminded that even in my darkest times, there is resurrection, and that God is always there. Yeah, Rachel.
But sometimes people are angry with
Oh
God.
yeah, absolutely.
And they turn their back on God because their loved one was taken. And what they really need to do is come to church.
And here's
like
yes.
you did.
But here's the thing too. I wasn't angry with God, okay? But my nephew was. When my dad died,
Yes.
my nephew was angry with God.
I've known many who
And it took him 10 years to come back. And I will say this, in those 10 years I never stopped praying for him. Because I believe that we can be angry with God. And there was something for my nephew that he just couldn't get beyond it. But then something happened in year 10. And he knew that he needed God. He knew that he couldn't. And now my nephew preaches at church. When the pastor's gone, my nephew preaches at church. So I think the thing is, we can't judge someone. So when I said we should be here, we can't judge someone and where they are at in their grieving, because we all grieve in different ways. And for my nephew, it was 10 years of grieving. Yeah, Rachel.
when my youngest daughter died, my husband did not want to go to church. And I said, in spite of your anger with God, we're going to church.
Yeah.
And he thanked me many times later.
And I should back up the wagon. My nephew was angry with God for 10 years. That doesn't mean that he didn't go to church.
Yeah.
He did go to church. And really he was angry with God at church. So but it was healthy. That was healthy for him to be angry with God. And God could take it.
Why was he angry?
He was angry that my dad was basically his best friend. My dad raised him. He was the father figure for my nephew. And my nephew was devastated because the relationship was so good that he basically thought that the world ended. When my dad died, he thought the world ended. He had to learn that it didn't end. It was different. He had to learn the world was different. It took him 10 years to realize that. So, and that's it. We cannot judge someone when they're in their grief because we don't know how they're reacting to something. And so, I'm thankful he is, happy again. And I want to say happy in the sense of he still misses my dad terribly. But happy, and now he's got his mom to grieve too, but happy in the sense of that he's no longer angry with God. He can admit that he doesn't understand this whole thing that we live here on this earth, but that he trusts that God is in the midst of it. Yeah,
but
Rachel.
because he came to church or went to church, I think that helped him immensely.
Right.
But it takes a while for that to sink in like everything else.
He still heard on Sundays when he went, he still heard
Absolutely.
about resurrection.
It
He
still
still
hurts.
heard about resurrection. Yeah.
You still go.
Yeah. All right. Shall we go on to Luke? And let's just read it and then see what we've got.
On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well."
Well, honey,
Good lesson.
why
It is a
why
good
did
lesson.
he tell him to go to the priest?
Because that was the law. The law was, if you were healed of a disease, the priest is the one who had to verify it. And once the priest verified it, then you could return to the community. And so Jesus was just following the law here.
Oh,
Yeah,
It says they were made clean as they went.
right. They
So
were
then
made
he-
clean as they went.
Yeah.
Right, right. I think the thing we need to understand here is that the way we look at this and the way we understand it is that Jesus is angry with the other 9. But he's not. He's not angry with the other 9.
he just wonders where they are.
Right, he just wondered where they were. Why is he not angry with the other 9?
They're
I
doing
would have
what he
been.
told them.
Exactly. They are doing what Jesus told them to do, right? He's not angry with them for doing what he told them to do. But what are they missing out on?
The blessing from him.
Yes. And so it is here, then he said to them, "Get up and go on your way, your faith has made you well." That's the translation in the New Revised Standard Version. It is, "Get up and go on your way, your faith has made you," the words that can be used for that is, "Get up and go on your way, your faith has made you whole," or "Your faith has saved you," or there was a third word and I can't remember what it is. It is the fact that not only was he healed physically, he was also healed spiritually. And that's something that the other 9 missed out on. They were healed physically, but because they didn't give thanks and praise to God for what God had done, they were not spiritually filled. And sometimes we think this is that God is saying that one person was good and the rest of them were bad. It's not good and bad. It's better and best. Right? Better and best. Joe?
Did the Samaritan have the priest to go back to, like,
Interesting question. So here's all this, yes. So here's all this too, is that we have to look at this. There were 10 of them. Supposedly, 9 of them were Jewish, and one of them is the Samaritan, the outsider, right? 9 of them are Jewish, and the outsider is the Samaritan. The Samaritan knows that in essence, as he is with these Jewish people, he really is owed nothing. He is owed nothing. So why would 9 Jewish men be with one hated Samaritan?
that was my next question.
Yeah. Why are 9
Because they're all
Jewish men
unclean.
with one? Because they're all unclean. You're right. They're all unclean.
Well, Samaritans are put together regardless of where they come from.
They're what?
They're separated.
Right. They're separated.
Yeah.
But here they're all together.
Yeah.
They are as
Yeah,
a
but
group
The
here.
separation, putting them all together, doesn't make any difference to their background, right?
No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, why are they together? They shouldn't be. Just like Jesus should not have talked to the Samaritan woman at the well. Jesus should not have talked to the Syrophoenician woman who came because she wanted her children to have. Jesus should not have talked with the Samaritan, should not have been with 9 Jewish men.
Except that they were all unclean.
They were all unclean, and they all suffered from leprosy, and they were all outside the community. Now, when they're all cast out of the community, what happens? Now suddenly it doesn't matter if you're Samaritan or Jewish or whatever, you're all cast out.
Yeah.
And so they hung together. They were all cast out to one place.
Those other 9 did not care whether this was a Samaritan or not.
Correct. Correct. They didn't
They
care.
had the same deathly illness.
Exactly. Exactly. They didn't care that he was a Samaritan at all. But it was here's what I'm going to say, he's doubly outcast. He's outcast from the society there because he's a Samaritan, and he's outcast because he has leprosy. He's a double outcast. And yet it's Jesus who praises him for returning, and not the other 9.
We might ask ourselves, why is this story here this way?
Yeah.
And
What does it say to us?
It says, what does it say to the Jews?
Mm-hmm.
It says, all can come to Jesus. The Samaritan recognized Jesus.
Right.
And I think he's saying, here's the time where I am here, not just for Jews.
Yeah.
I'm here for the Samaritans too. He's done that a couple of times.
Absolutely.
He's not just for the Jews.
Absolutely.
It's for the Samaritans.
He's allowing the outsider in.
And the Samaritans particularly.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. But I do think this has a message for us too. How many times do we forget to thank God for the blessings that we've been given? Now, we may not be healed of our leprosy, but this goes back to the everyday blessings that we have. You know what? In the morning, do you know what the first blessing is? We wake up. When was the last time you thanked God for waking up? Right? So it's the ordinary, everyday kinds of things that we're called to do in the world, but it's also the ordinary, everyday things that God blesses us with. And this is a reminder to us that we are to be whole, right? To be whole, I don't even know, let's make it the word whole. To be made well, to be whole, means that we recognize that it's God's doing. And when we thank God, what does that do? It builds up our trust in God. So that the next time something happens that's big, well, we've got all these little thank yous that are going on, and we trust God, trust God, trust God, trust God. That when it comes to that big thing, it's innate. It's a part of us because we've been doing it all along. Rachel?
Don't you think that the 9 had to go out and witness?
Right. Well, and that's the thing. The 9 were doing they were healed physically. And they were doing exactly what they were supposed to do by law. Right? This is also an example of Jesus praising someone who went against the law. Now, even though it was a Samaritan, he went against the law.
Well,
right?
I know that the 9 were not going back to thank him, that's showing their gratitude, but they had to witness to
Oh
what
my
has
gosh,
happened.
absolutely. They went out and witnessed. I mean, the very fact that they could go home was a witness.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. See, and that's the thing. We can't say that the 9 were not being used by God. They absolutely were. Because just by going home and people are looking at them going, oh. I mean, there's a piece of scripture one time where the blind man's healed. And remember the Jewish people bring in his parents? And his parents go, well, it looks like him, but we can't say for sure. You know, you ask him, he's of age, right? Exactly. And so yes, Rachel, to your point, these 9 are going to do some great things to bring people to believe in Jesus. They're going to do some great things. But what Jesus is pointing out here
they're
is
missing the relationship.
Yes! They're missing the relationship. Oh my gosh, Rachel, that preaches. They're missing the relationship. I love it.
I'm thinking about when these 9 people go back to the priests, what are they going to tell them?
Yeah, exactly.
Are they going to make up a story, or are they going to admit that Jesus did this
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah.
And the priest is gonna say,
Oh,
what's he gonna say? You mean to tell me that this guy's still out there doing this?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And here's something that's important that we learn where in context where this is happening. Jesus is walking to Jerusalem. This is near the end of his life where this is happening. And you're absolutely right. When they go back to the priest and they're healed, and it was Jesus that healed them, and it wasn't the priest that could heal them, they didn't have the power to heal them, they're angry. This just builds up one more time that we need to get rid of Jesus. These people love him.
I'm wondering if these 9 don't make up a story. And they don't want to.
Oh.
They don't want any retribution upon them for what Jesus did.
And they've been outside the community for so long, they're willing to lie so that they are brought back into the community.
I mean, that's the thing that the human thing to this is what happens.
Yes. It's sort of like Peter. It's sort of like Peter when Jesus is on trial and Peter's outside and he says, oh, you're the guy with Jesus. And what does Peter say? No, I'm not. Yeah, 3 times. No, I'm not. They could very well be denying that it was Jesus who healed them. That's a thought.
That may be a lesson to take too, is once that happens to you, what do you say?
Right.
We often don't give God credit.
Right.
We
What
take
do
credit
we say?
for,
What do we say about
I'm
that?
able to do this one.
Right.
Yeah.
And then maybe.
Or, well, we were just walking here and on the walk we were all made clean.
There's a movie about a boxer. He's from a bad time. And the movie says, somebody up there likes me. And that was in his life, ultimately.
Yeah.
Was that even though he had a terrible life, he had good boxing, terrible times in boxing, that out of it all, with his wife, he found out when their wife was somebody up there likes me.
Right.
I thought that was a crazy thing to think.
Yes.
And
Yes.
he lived it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for coming out this